Are you wearing the right running shoe? Everyone has a unique foot, gait, and for me, injury rehab at play, so you may want to consider something that's more tailored towards your specific needs. Today I'm testing these 4 New Balance shoes to determine which is going to work the best for my marathon training. Now I've thrown them on in store, but never actually used any of the super shoes that came onto the scene a few years back, so my question is, are they worth the price? Are they going to help me run more efficiently? And most importantly for me, can they help me prevent further injuries in the future? Well, let's find out. Now, coming back from an injury, I know I have to be extremely careful with my training, and lucky for me, I work for a running shoe store, so I can start by picking the right shoe. Choosing the right runner is important for a number of reasons, but especially if you have a history of injuries, it can be the difference between relapsing and achieving your running goals week in, week out. I've narrowed it down to the Fresh Foam 880 V14, the Fuel Cell Rebel V4, the Fuel Cell Super Comp Trainer V2, and the Fuel Cell Super Comp Elite V4. I'm sticking to New Balance because their shoes have worked well for me in the past. Now, how am I actually going to conduct this test? Because of course, I can tell you what feels the best, and over my years reviewing in other disciplines, I've developed a certain feel for what makes certain products perform better, but I don't have a vast experience in reviewing running shoes. Lucky for us, our friends at Form Physio recently brought in the cutting-edge Run Easy AI Gait Analysis belt. Form Physio has never been afraid to move with the times, and despite being a small team, they've made a huge splash in the BC Physio game, becoming one of the go-to locations for athletes looking to stay active while recovering. That really resonated with me because I need to stay active if for nothing else but my mental sanity, so I was really happy to rehab with them, and I was also very excited to try this belt with them because I knew if they brought it in, it was worth trying. This belt straps onto your lower back and analyzes your run data to give you a final efficiency rating based off of 3 metrics: impact loading, dynamic stability, and symmetry. Jennifer Chu, one of the 3 physios at Form, has become an expert at using this belt to help her patients recover from injury and adopt better running technique, and that's when an idea sparked in our heads. What we have here is a tool that can tell me exactly, to the most precise detail, which shoe I run better in and why it works better for me, so let's make the most of it. We're going to use the Run Easy belt to analyze how I run with all 4 of these shoes to then make a more educated decision as to which one I should use for my training and eventually for the marathon. I'm also going to use it to explain how each shoe performed and try to compare the data to what I was feeling during the test for a more comprehensive analysis of the pros and cons to each shoe. Now, before we start testing, I want to let Jen explain a little bit more about how the belt works because she knows a lot more than me.
Run Easy is based on a decade of published research between the Human Movement and Artificial Intelligence research groups of KU Leuven and Stellenbosch University. In these studies, they have found that these specific components in running gait correlate with running efficiency and injury risk. Using artificial intelligence, it then helps us to pinpoint weak links and help us generate individualized recommendations either on footwear choices or individual biomechanics when running based on that information. Let's briefly break down the different categories here. So first of all, we've got dynamic stability. Dynamic stability refers to the transverse plane, which is the medial lateral wobble off of our center of mass. This component of our running gait is important because any hip or torso movement in the medial lateral direction that is not contributing to forward propulsion in running would reduce our running efficiency, since that medial lateral wobble would be energy loss that is not helping us run forward. The second component is impact loading. Impact loading refers to the vertical acceleration in the sagittal plane. Impact loading is made up of 2 measures, namely impact magnitude, which measures how much impact our body experiences during running, as well as impact duration, which gives us good insight on how well we're absorbing the impact with our body. Impact duration can be seen as a modulator of our impact magnitude because longer impact duration means our body is spreading the load and can reduce impact magnitude. So these 2 measures essentially work together to help us get the impact loading score. Lastly, we look at symmetry, which is the relative difference between the 2 sides of our body, left and right, during stance phase to measure how well our body is balanced while we're running. There are also some other spatial temporal data that we can get from our Run Easy technology, like step time or cadence, ground contact time, flight ratio, etc. And all of these different parameters paired together with our video running gait analysis then allow us to do a deeper dive into your running gait to let us help you optimize your running efficiency and pick the perfect shoes for your individualized running gait to best suit your specific goals and training needs.
So that's the Run Easy belt. Pretty magical if you ask me, and one afternoon we set off on our journey to test the 4 shoes. Jen brought up a great idea to start with a controlled test to set a baseline score that we could use as a reference when analyzing the other shoes. We set the baseline by having me run barefoot at the 2 speeds we were testing, 6.7 and 9.5 miles an hour. We decided to test at 2 different speeds because we realized, of course, that some shoes might be relatively better at higher speeds and vice versa. Without further ado, let's get into the review. So the barefoot test started pretty well. I was actually very pleasantly surprised. It didn't feel too uncomfortable at all. At 6.5 miles an hour, I got an efficiency score of 42%, and at 9.5 miles an hour, it went down to 34%, and that gave us a great idea as to my natural running efficiency without the effect of a shoe's technology. We decided to go in logical order for the test, starting with the 880, then the Rebel, and then we went to the 2 carbon-plated shoes, starting with the Super Comp Trainer and then the Elite. I started running with the 880 and obviously felt an instant increase in performance after running barefoot. It felt like home for a running shoe. It's a traditional neutral runner, and that's what I've been using for most of my runs over the last 5 or 6 years. There was some nice plush cushioning under my foot that absorbed impact very well, but it wasn't pillowy soft the way a maximum cushion shoe like the 1080 feels. I personally don't love that overly cushioned feel. It makes me feel like I'm losing a bit of spring and energy return, and I also feel like it's a bit wobbly at times. I wasn't getting that on the 880. At 6.7 miles an hour, I was feeling super comfortable and I had great feel for the ground, so I could use that feedback to dial in my technique. I got a score of 50% at that pace, so a huge boost compared to the barefoot baseline, which was to be expected, and when we increased it to 9.5 miles an hour, I dropped pretty significantly to 37%. Now this is interesting because it's only slightly better than my barefoot score, and it did feel a lot better, but as I started testing the other shoes, this lower score did make sense. When I increased the pace, obviously my cadence got quicker, and especially my impact with the ground got heavier. Especially with that heavier impact, I felt like the fresh foam was almost bottoming out at a certain point, and when I was getting to that end point, I was losing a lot of efficiency with my stride. I'll talk about this more when I move on to the Rebel in a second, but it does feel like that fresh foam is really in its element at slower speeds. That's when it's soft and comfortable and you're not really looking for that extra energy return, but as you increase the pace, you start to feel it lacking a bit of juice. That became quite obvious once I threw on the Rebel. As soon as I put on the Rebel, even just walking to the machine, I could tell this was a very different shoe that was going to give very different results. This has fuel cell foam instead of fresh foam, and already at that walking pace, it felt quite a bit firmer. I wouldn't describe it as plush the way I said the 880 was. It pushes back against you quite a bit more, not in an uncomfortable way, but it's definitely noticeable. I started the 6.7 mile an hour test, and this is where I ran into a little issue with the Rebel. There is a very pronounced amount of arch support that felt kind of like a ball pushing up into my foot. Now, none of the other shoes have anything close to this amount of arch support, and I wasn't the biggest fan. I have quite a strong high arch, so I don't really need anything extra there, and if anything, I felt like it was pushing me to supinate a bit. I know a lot of people will like this, but if you don't need any arch support, that is worth noting, and I think this may have had a slightly negative effect on my results. I kept actively thinking about it both at the slow and fast pace, so I wasn't as free through my stride. I got an efficiency score of 51 at the slower pace and 39 at the faster pace. That's +2 in the fast rating and +1 in the slower one compared to the 880, and that definitely makes sense. When I was running slow, it felt good, and I did like that snappier cushioning, but the firmer feel of the fuel cell really kicked in as I upped the pace. That firmness becomes more springy as you're going faster. Fresh foam is really a modern take on classic cushioning. It doesn't really have any extra spring to it, which is why it performs relatively worse compared to the fuel cell as you're upping the pace, and the data back that up with a higher efficiency score. We are going to move on to the carbon-plated super shoes now, but before that, I do want to note a couple of things, the first one being that we are taking a big step up in price. I'm going to say a lot of good things about the Super Comp Trainer and Super Comp Elite, but not everyone wants to splash this amount of money on their running shoes, especially not if they're training shoes that they have to replace relatively frequently. The other thing that's worth noting is that by this point, I had already run 6 kilometers, and half of those at a pace I definitely can't sustain for that distance, so fatigue was potentially becoming a factor. I wasn't really feeling tired, and I did start taking longer breaks at this point, but the Run Easy belt is an extremely precise instrument that can catch even the most marginal decrease in efficiency that would come from being tired. The results are still consistent with my experience, but just keep that in mind as we go forward. If moving from the 880 to the Rebel felt like a big step, no pun intended, then this felt like I had just landed on the moon. If you've never put on a carbon-plated shoe, I can understand if you think I'm exaggerating, but I promise you I'm not. The SuperComp trainer gave me this extremely pleasant weightless sensation, almost like I was walking on less gravity. So I started running at 6.7 miles an hour, and a few things stuck out right away. Even at this speed, I still felt a comfortable bounce from the shoe, unlike what I had felt with the Rebel. It's definitely a firmer ride than the 880, but the plate was soaking up that impact extremely efficiently, definitely more than both the non-carbon plated shoes, and the data backs that up. It gave me an efficiency score of 51%, which is the same as the Rebel, but it felt better, and I think the reason it's the same is probably due to a bit of fatigue. Now I also have to say, because this provided such a unique ride compared to the other two, it was harder to be critical, but one of the things I kept thinking as I was running slowly was that I was resisting the shoe a little bit. Hopefully this makes sense, but it's kind of like in Harry Potter when Voldemort says that the Elder Wand resists him. It felt like the shoe had a lot more to offer and that slow pace is what was stopping it from reaching its full potential. It also felt a tiny bit unstable at this speed. If you're not used to a carbon plate, it can be a little bit wobbly at first. Obviously, with my injury, I was being super careful, and you don't necessarily want to be thinking like that the whole time you're running, but I do want to make it clear this was very subtle and actually more stable than the Elite, and I'll talk about why later. But anyways, we upped the speed to 9.5 miles an hour, and my efficiency score went up to a 40, +1 on the Rebel and +3 on the 880, and that's despite any potential negative effect from fatigue. At that faster speed, this felt like a significant improvement, even compared to the Rebel, which was already much better than the 880. The Rebel's fuel cell feels more efficient than Fresh Foam at a higher speed. The carbon plate amplified that efficiency, but it also literally added a spring to my step, which made me feel faster. That boost is what was lacking at the slower speed, and why I said it felt like I was resisting the shoe. I think it was still there to a certain extent, but it gets better and better the faster you go because it amplifies as you apply more force into the ground. These carbon-plated shoes are race shoes, so it's pretty logical that they perform relatively better at higher speeds. And while I was running at this speed, I also noticed something new with my running technique that may also explain that better efficiency. Because they were springing me through my step, I noticed I wasn't squeezing my foot as much as it left the ground. This is something I think I did subconsciously with the other two, but basically I would try and add that spring myself by squeezing my toes to propel myself forward. I wasn't doing that here because the shoe was basically doing it for me. That allowed my feet to feel much more relaxed, which was actually very positive, especially on that right ankle. Squeezing and tensing your muscles isn't necessarily risky, but if you can avoid it, you are giving yourself the best chance to avoid re-injury. I also started to appreciate this the longer I ran because I felt like by being more relaxed, I wasn't fatiguing as quickly. I think this is part of why the efficiency score was higher, and you're going to see now with the Elite, I used that more relaxed, efficient technique right at the start of the test, and the numbers definitely showed that. I think if I were to repeat that SuperComp trainer test, I would get a higher efficiency score than I did the first time around. Keep in mind, those are really the first 4 minutes I had ever run with a carbon-plated shoe, and I think it took me a bit of time to adjust my stride to benefit from what they have to offer. Because I had figured it out by the end of that test, I literally hit the ground running with the Elite. My score went up to a 53 at that 6.7 mile an hour pace. I did still feel like the shoe was resisting me, actually even more than the trainer, so I was a little bit surprised to see such a high score, but it must have been a byproduct of that better technique I had developed. Now, like it was with the trainer, as soon as I upped the tempo, the SuperComp Elite really came into its own. I felt so efficient, actually a bit better than with the trainer. The Elite has more of a pronounced rocker that amplifies that springy feel, and I started feeling so efficient that I actually decreased my cadence, lengthened my stride, and started really rolling through that gait cycle rather than stomping my way through it the way I had been. You can actually see in the results, my cadence was 173 with the SuperComp Elite at 9.5 miles an hour. With the previous three shoes, I was running at least 175. I felt like I was using much less energy and that the shoe itself was propelling me more, and the final efficiency score was pretty astounding, 46% at 9.5 miles an hour. That's +6 on the SuperComp trainer. I actually couldn't believe how good I felt running with the speed with the Elite. I wasn't expecting this big of a jump in performance, but I felt like I could have gone on at that speed for much longer than with the other shoes. It also felt like if I wanted to increase the pace, instead of raising my cadence, I just had to lengthen my stride, which kind of feels like extra speed for free. It's pretty cool that the data backed all this up because it legitimizes what I was feeling during the run. This is a fast shoe, but it's also an efficient shoe, and efficiency is one of the best ways to conserve energy. Now, it's not all positive with the SuperComp Elite. This is an aggressive race shoe. There's less padding in the heel, and the upper isn't quite as comfortable because they're trying to shave as much weight as possible. The other thing is that the Elite feels a little bit less stable than the Trainer, especially in the heel because it has quite a narrow platform. This is probably by design because a smaller contact patch feels a bit quicker, but if I'm putting a lot of miles in the shoe, there are times where I'm going to be lazy, and that could be punishing, especially on my injured ankle. Overall though, it's quite an amazing shoe to run with. I feel like I somehow improved as a runner as I was testing it. There was a more pro feeling to the way I was going through my gait, and that energy return the carbon provides is really quite special. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy with these results. One, because the data backs up what I was feeling pretty much perfectly, and two, because it proves that there is a logical tier to these shoes, but also that each one of them does serve a purpose. Sure, the Super Comp Elite gave me better scores in both categories, but it was relatively more efficient at higher speeds, and because these carbon plates don't last forever, I would highly recommend you only use it when you are trying to go as fast as possible. That doesn't mean only when you're sprinting or running a 2K or something short, by the way. That means whenever you're trying to maximize your efficiency, either to hit a PR or beat someone in a race scenario. That's what it does best, and it is a quicker shoe than all the others, no doubt about it, but it certainly doesn't make them all obsolete. The Super Comp Trainer costs almost $100 less, and I wouldn't say the performance is that far inferior. Like I said, if I had spent more time or repeated the test with this shoe, I think I would have scored closer to the Elite than the other two, and that kind of performance at this price is really good. I also definitely don't think that, despite its name, this is a shoe that's limited to training. You can definitely race quickly with it, but because it is a little bit more comfortable and more stable than the Elite, if you do want to train with a carbon-plated shoe, this is a little bit better. Now how about the other two? Because I'm not gonna lie, after running with carbon-plated shoes, it is a little tough to go back, but that's not how you should think about these. Most people should be training in non-carbon plated shoes, but then the question is, when do you pick the 880 and when do you pick the Rebel? Really, it's a matter of preference. Some people will prefer the more springy feel of Fuel Cell, and others will prefer the all-day softness that you get from Fresh Foam. I do think the Rebel is better for faster runs because, like I said, at higher speeds that springier foam is more efficient, but the 880 is better for longer, slower runs because over time the softness is definitely going to be more comfortable. The Rebel is also a fantastic option for those of you wanting a faster race shoe if you don't have the budget to go for something with a carbon plate. What am I going to use? Well, for the marathon, I definitely think I'm going to go with the Super Comp Elite. This is the fastest shoe. I want to get the quickest time possible, so this is the one I should go with to accomplish that goal. For my training, I think I'm going to split my time between the 880 and the Super Comp Trainer. I'll use the 880 for longer endurance runs and the Trainer when I'm upping the pace either for intervals or for faster, shorter runs. I really like the feel of that carbon plate, especially on my right ankle, because that springier sensation does seem to relieve some pressure by making me more efficient and less stompy. The Rebel is also great, but I don't think I'll be using it because of the arch support it provides. I prefer a totally neutral feel, but I will be testing it here and there to see if I can adapt. Now obviously, I've used a pretty special tool to analyze what shoe works best for my gait and my current situation, and not everybody's going to have access to something like that. The goal of this video wasn't so much to tell you this is the best way to test shoes, but rather to explain the differences between these shoes so that you can make a more educated decision as to which one works better for yourself. The best way to pick a shoe is by going to a reputable retail store like Rackets Runners, because there you'll find shoe fitters who can analyze your gait and best identify what'll work for your current situation. That's going to be it for this video today. I know it was a very long one, and quite honestly, with all the detail this belt provides, it could have been much longer. If you like how we conducted this analysis, please support this video with a like, and let me know in the comments section how you'd like us to continue with it going forward. We're trying to grow this channel and exploring all the tools we have to do so going forward. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and remember that if you want to try on any of these shoes, you can come visit our awesome shoe fitters in store, or if you want to buy them, you can go online at racketsandrunners.ca.